Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. We're still broadcasting in my home. We're also running a couple of minutes late today, which is not something we've been doing as much for whatever reason we've been doing the show from home. But nonetheless, we do have a full and busy show prepared for you. It is Mike Griffith. A little bit later on, we'll get a chance to chat with Mike about what Kirby Smart has had to say this week as Georgia begins its preparations for Missouri on Saturday, and then what could be coming after that for the Dogs with the scheduled game against Vanderbilt on the 19th. And we will see all the moving pieces that have to come together related to that. We'll do a lot of that with Mike Griffith here today. Going to have some more fun with the Rick Gilbert rumors and discussions. That's obviously a fascinating topic for me, just given how impressed I was with Gilbert when he was a prospect at Marietta High School and what he's validated about that attention based on the way that he's played thus far as a freshman at LSU. We'll tell you what Ed Orgeron has said about the situation in Baton Rouge, and in a roundabout way, what Georgia coach Kirby Smart had to say about similar types of situations. He spoke about the transfer market and the portal and how Georgia plans to navigate that in the future. Smart had some interesting things to say about that last night. Before we get to any of that, though, let me bask in the glow just a bit more of what's kind of going on with Georgia in recruiting as of late, especially after the commitment yesterday of four-star defensive back Nyland Green. And I think there is something fascinating that's kind of unfolding right now for Georgia in the class of 2021. And I guess the way of explaining this, let me just say this, and I'm pretty sure I said this at the time, is that if you want to go back last year, that if you look at the way in which Georgia's recruiting, knocking it out of the park, stacking elite bodies, elite prospects, one after the other. And yet, if you want to use the 2020 cycle as certainly as an example of this, a lot of it was kind of done more from the national perspective than it was the in-state perspective. And what we said at the time is that this wasn't necessarily good or bad. It was just interesting to me that in a way, Georgia had found a way to recruit a top flight, truly elite by any measuring stick type of class. And yet they kind of found a way to do it in the most difficult way possible. Going to Nevada and getting five-star tight end Darnell Washington, as opposed to going to Marietta and getting five-star, tight end Rick Gilbert, who, as I said before, we'll kind of get into more in just a little bit. That Georgia had kind of cast this wide national net in terms of the prospects that it was bringing in. And really, there were some high-profile in-state misses. And if you just took kind of the thin slice, the simple snapshot of some of the guys that Georgia had missed out on, Gilbert, Miles Murphy would come to mind. You can think of others. If you just look at that sort of small snapshot of some of the guys that Georgia had swung and missed on in-state, if I told you that in almost any given year, you would have said, well, gosh, Georgia's 2020 recruiting class must be a disappointment. It must not quite be, what it's supposed to be if these guys that are highly rated in Georgia's own backyard, if Georgia's not getting those guys, then who is it getting? You would maybe ask. Well, come to find out, Georgia was getting plenty, still number one in recruiting, putting all of that together while also kind of missing out on some of the guys in the state. And for what it's worth, Kirby Smart was pretty candid about this. Speaking about this last year, on the subject of who you got, who you didn't get, the national versus the in-state, Smart kind of acknowledged the fact that Georgia just happened to win some battles that it was kind of pursuing on the nationals from the national perspective, and kind of swung and missed on some of the guys in-state. Smart didn't pull any punches in describing the way that last year's class for the Dogs kind of came together. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart from last February on that topic.
Number one, we had more interest from out-of-state kids. So we had some national interest from players that came to camp and really performed well that in the past we might have lost out on. It might have been second or third on a national kid that was a really good player, say a Darnell, say a Kendall, say a Keeley. But we won a lot of those. The other part is we lost some in-state battles that were really, really good players. And so I think the two of those merged to just kind of happen at unique positions where, hey, we'd have taken the in-state guy or we'd have taken the out-of-state guy. It just so happened we got the out-of-state guy. But we're excited for those players, and there's been a lot of good out-of-state players play here at the University of Georgia. There's no limitation to your borders, but we certainly respect and understand how good our state is and what the high school coaches do.
And so that's Kirby Smart saying that of, listen, we may have won some in-state, I should say some national recruiting battles in 2020, but we still understand what the in-state, the value of winning those in-state battles as well. Those were Smart's own words going back to February. And yet I think there was a narrative that got constructed, even though I'll say that it's neither good nor bad, that Georgia's recruiting class in 2020 was more of a national construct than kind of an in-state stripe. There were a lot of folks who said, well, maybe it's harder for Georgia to win recruiting battles in the state of Georgia than it is, across the country. Maybe there are players that just want to leave home. Maybe Atlanta as a big metropolitan area, maybe it's just too transient. Maybe the people that live here didn't grow up here, and therefore maybe Atlanta isn't quite as, dyed-in-the-wool UGA country as other parts of the state are. Maybe Georgia can have the number one class in the country, but can't clean up with the number one prospects in its own state. Maybe this is just too hard to do. That's one of the things that I think has made the 2021 cycle so fascinating. A moment ago, you saw Amarius Mims, Smile Mondin, if you're watching on video anyway, signing, making their commitment announcements and letting folks know they were, coming to Georgia. You've seen that kind of stuff a lot more frequently this year, Mims and Mondin, both in-state prospects, than you've seen in previous years. All of a sudden, Georgia is saying, hey, you've seen us rack up and get the best players in the country while also maybe missing on some players in the state of Georgia. Now you're about to see us rack up and get elite prospects, really cleaning house in our own state. Let me give you an example of this. I'm going to use the 24/7 Sports composite rankings for players in the state of Georgia here. Listen to this for a moment. Number one overall prospect in the state, according to 24/7 Sports, Amarius Mims. You saw him on your screen a moment ago if you're watching on video. Obviously a Georgia commit. Brock Vandegrift, the number two prospect, obviously a Georgia commit. Mondin, obviously Georgia commit. He's number three. Georgia did miss on Barrett Carter, the number four player, and I will flat out tell you, I think that Barrett Carter is an unbelievable player. I would love to have had him in Georgia's 2021 class, but you literally can't get them all. Jay Garcia is number five. He's back on the open market again. As you know, Garcia is not even technically really from Georgia, and Georgia also already has a quarterback commit. So you almost don't even really count Garcia on this list. Georgia probably did lose Terrence Ferguson to Alabama, but Georgia, as we said before, cleaned up with Amarius Mims, the player rated higher. Micah Morris, one spot below that, is also a Georgia commit. So if you're keeping score here, of the top seven players in the state of Georgia right now, Georgia's got commits from 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top seven. But keep on going here for a minute. Jordan Hancock's going to Ohio State, the defensive back from North Gwinnett. But then number 9 player in the state, Nyland Green, just committed to Georgia yesterday. David Daniel, number 10. He's been in the fold for the Dogs for a while. And, of course, Dylan Fairchild, who's West Forsyth team pulled an upset over North Gwinnett last week, at least what I would call an upset. He's a hard Georgia commit, and he's number 11. So of the top 11 players in the state of Georgia, according to the 24/7 Sports composite for the state, Georgia has commits from 7 of the top 11 in the state of Georgia right now, really making the construction of this class, the makeup of this class, different than previous Kirby Smart classes have been before, racking up in-state recruiting wins after winning nationally so much really last cycle and certainly maybe over the course of the last couple of cycles. And I guess it remains to be seen if this was an intentional strategy because of the absence of visits and the way the coronavirus has impacted the world of high school football recruiting, or if this is just kind of the way that luck had it for the Dogs here in 2021. Either way, there's something just kind of nice about it. I do love the idea of Dogs staying at home, as the phrase has been used before. And I don't mind Georgia going out and getting top national recruits. Frankly, I like them too. But there is a sense of pride that comes when a guy like Nyland Green follows in the footsteps of a guy like Eric Stokes from his same hometown, or when someone like Dylan Fairchild, who has family decked out in red and black gear on the day that he chooses Georgia. There is truly something to be said for these in-state guys finding a way to stay at home. Georgia's done a great job of that for the class of 2021. And here in our program today, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to notice just that. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. And I'm happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. As many of you can tell, I am still broadcasting from home here, and I know that makes the show just a little bit different, and trust me, I notice that as much as you do. I appreciate your patience with all of that, and hopefully we're still able to deliver you a terrific product. Hopefully you feel that way. And I certainly appreciate my friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for allowing us to do that for you here today. Let me tell you something. when 2020 is over, I'm going to need a vacation. I'm going to need myself a little bit of a weekend getaway. And Harris Cherokee Casino Resort is a great option for that. They have 2 locations. They're both a 2-hour drive from Atlanta. So you can get away from the real world, but you can do so in a short amount of time, just a 2-hour drive. That's what Harris Cherokee Casino Resort provides the opportunity to do, whether it's the original property, Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, or the Harris Cherokee Valley River. They're all there for you on that. Luxury shopping, tremendous gourmet dining, a relaxing spa, a wonderful gaming floor that's now designed in such a way to magnify social distancing. It is all the options that a Harris Cherokee Casino Resort has available to you. And the best way to make sure you take advantage of this is also to become a member of Caesars Rewards as well. You can get special incentives and savings when you become a Caesars Rewards member there at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Here's the website to go to find out more. Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. It'll be Mike Griffith here coming up in just a moment. Before that, let's go around the doghouse here today, delivered by Marco's Pizza. And I do want to spend some more time on the subject of Rick Gilbert, the former 5-star tight end, signed with LSU. The time that Gilbert signs with LSU, it's still Joe Burrow, it's Joe Brady, and this is the biggest brand in all of college football last year, the way the Tigers were scoring points. Well, Joe Burrow's now at the Bengals, Joe Brady's now at the Carolina Panthers, and LSU is very much a poor imitation of what it was a year ago as the national champions. And for a lot of players, there could be some buyer's remorse when you sign up to be a part of a program that doesn't quite feel the same way it did when you initially signed up. Maybe that's what Rick Gilbert's going through. It has been reported, we kind of gave some of this to you yesterday, that Gilbert is considering transferring. Well, that's not exactly the way that LSU coach Ed Orgeron is trying to describe it. Orgeron makes a weekly appearance on the Baton Rouge radio station yesterday, and I'll put a full link to the interview when I post the show later on to the world-famous DawgNation.com. But when Orgeron makes an appearance on Baton Rouge radio on Tuesday, instead of saying that Rick Gilbert is transferring, Orgeron says maybe Rick Gilbert's just considering opting out for this year. This is an interesting spin on this from Orgeron and interesting details as provided by the LSU coach. Take a listen to this with T-Bob Hebert and Ed Orgeron.
Eric came talk to me yesterday. He's thinking about opting out for the season. He said his body is hurting and he has to get better. His mother's in town speaking with him right now. I don't know if he officially announced it yet, but that's where we're at. That's what he discussed with me yesterday.
Coach, do you think if he makes that decision, would his teammates be willing to take him back? I've had players quit on teams that I was a part of, and it really kind of ended the relationship then and there.
Yeah, I think so. T-Bob, I think that if he opts out and he wants to come back, definitely I'm going to take him back. He's a great player. He's a great young man. I recruited him, and we treat him like family, just like everybody else.
So there's a lot to unpack there from Orgeron on the Baton Rouge radio station. First of all, the spin from Orgeron that this isn't a transfer for Rick Gilbert. This is just an opt-out. His body is hurting, and he's thinking about opting out, and his mom's in town. They're talking about that. But when you hear the line of questioning from Hebert, you see a way in which this is also kind of being spun by other people in Baton Rouge. Hebert says, and he's a former LSU player, and he was a good one, but Hebert says, hey, if one of my guys, and you heard the word that Hebert used, quit on the team, I'm not sure we would have wanted him back. And there was some former LSU player chatter on Twitter about this too. You know, it's not Rick Gilbert's own words that says, my body's hurting, I want to rest. That's what Orgeron says about him. But that description has been used by a few LSU players on Twitter to kind of spin this against Rick Gilbert a bit, which I think is really pretty interesting all the way around there. That's the chatter kind of coming out of Baton Rouge on this. Now, I'm going to give our buddy Connor Riley some credit here because last night, when Georgia coach Kirby Smart met with reporters, the notion that a Rick Gilbert, might transfer in a place that once recruited him, Georgia, obviously in need of as many offensive playmakers as it can possibly get. I've told you that I think that Gilbert's a good one. I don't know that you could get a recruit in 2021 who's as dynamic of a potential playmaker as what a Rick Gilbert could be, given the fact that he put up big numbers at Marietta, and he's kind of validated that so far in his freshman year at LSU. If he was on the open market and if Georgia could get him, I'm telling you right now, I'd celebrate that as a huge win for the program if it could. And obviously the way in which Kirby Smart has recruited this kind of stuff in the past would seem to make that a possibility if indeed Gilbert's going to transfer. So Connor, knowing that Kirby can't speak about Gilbert by name, but can obviously speak about these kinds of situations, said, hey, how do you recruit these guys? Or does the presence of the transfer portal change the way that you recruit to maybe make sure that you keep those relationships open, those doors open in case somebody does decide they want to transfer a little bit later on? Smart says that he's always kind of recruited that way. This is Kirby from yesterday.
I was always considerate and nice when a guy didn't come anyway. I don't know if there was a portal when D-Rob came out. I can't remember, but I mean, I wasn't mad at D-Rob when he didn't come. I told him congratulations, best wishes, and let us know if we can ever help him with anything. So it never changed because there was a portal. The portal is just a public way of saying I'm a free agent. The way we recruit is the way we recruit. If they choose to go in the portal, great. And if there's kids in the portal then that we had a relationship with, then we're going to communicate with them if we're interested. But that it hasn't changed the way we recruited.
So I think that's really interesting stuff there from Kirby Smart, acknowledging that, yeah, listen, we've always tried to be nice to these kids recruiting because you never know what's going to happen after the fact. And, he mentions D-Rob by name. That's certainly an example of that. When Robertson initially chose Cal as part of the class of 2016, and lo and behold, a couple years later, he's back at Georgia. There are obviously a lot of people going to make that comparison with this situation right now. I'm actually going to bring in Mike Griffith and let him be a part of this conversation with us, a little bit impromptu and on the fly here as a part of our program from my home here today. Before I do that, though, let me give a shout out to Marco's Pizza as a part of Around the Doghouse. They delivered that to us today. And of course, Marco's, America's most beloved pizza. It's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. Great stuff there. They bake it in 450 degrees.
It's all about who they can get
contactless and touchless, delivered to you after that. It's good tasting pizza. It's a great price for you and your family there as well. Including this deal right now. You get a large specialty pizza and a large two-topping pizza for now just $23.99. Order that through the Marco's app or online at marcos.com. Make sure you check that out here today. So this is unorthodox to kind of roll right into this with Mike Griffith here with so little fanfare. But Mike, a lot of our audience was just getting a chance to hear what Kirby Smart said yesterday about the notion of, hey, recruiting kids, they go somewhere else, and all of a sudden the transfer portal might make that a possibility again. And Orgeron kind of downplaying what might be going on with a guy like a Rick Gilbert. What do you make of just kind of all of this situation as we welcome you into the program here today?
Well, thanks for letting me to be a part of it today, B.A. I do appreciate you letting me join the program. It is interesting. These are unprecedented times with Kirby saying this is going to be the largest early enrollee class, and yet he doesn't know where all these guys are going to fit, right? Because the juniors that are going pro haven't declared yet, and the seniors, as he pointed out, still count on the roster through the spring. So he kind of needs to know what they're going to do as well. I look at the Georgia seniors, and I think most of them are leaving, but there's a couple you wonder about, like maybe a Nate McBride or a Walter Grant. Do they want to stick around? And then conversely, if they're on scholarship, do you want them sticking around and taking up scholarship spots that talented freshmen or incoming transfers could get? So there's a lot of unprecedented activity right now, and Kirby Smart's got to be a careful and good decision maker.
Yeah, so I want to kind of unpack some of this over the course of the next couple of minutes, because some of this I would say is relatively complicated, especially in discussing, how some of those seniors who don't count against the 85 next year, but would potentially count against the 85 right now until, all that takes shape, because you can't have more, than 85 on campus for right now. So there's a lot to unpack related to all of that. But, certainly as someone, and we'll actually hear more from Kirby Smart on a similar topic here in just a moment, but I think certainly you would understand when it comes to a Rick Gilbert, the kind of excitement that generates amongst fans. Gilbert was one of those dazzling prospects that I had seen in the state of Georgia in quite some time with what he did there at Marietta. And I think that he's been a pretty important part of the LSU offense here this year. Mike, I have no way of knowing what a Rick Gilbert's going to do. Is he truly going to leave? Where is he going to go? There's plenty of reason to think he might choose a different school other than Georgia if he were to leave. All I can tell you is this, Mike, and I'm a big Georgia fan. I got the Georgia shirt on here today. There ain't many players I'd want more than Rick Gilbert if I had a chance to go get him. He's just such an interesting prospect. He really is a tight end that reminds you of a wide receiver. And I don't want to say he's the next Kyle Pitts or anything like that, but some of the things that Gilbert has the potential of doing, it's easy to kind of envision him in much the same role that a guy like Pitts has been for Florida. So even if we don't know where Gilbert's going to go, what he's going to do, it's easy to understand why Georgia fans might have some curiosity about him, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Jeff did a lot of reporting during his recruitment, and, he was a preferred target of Georgia's, a guy at the top of the priority list from in-state right there in Marietta. To your point, he is LSU's second leading receiver as a freshman. I absolutely think with some of the reports coming out that he's homesick. I mean, Georgia would be one of the closest that schools that's near him. I think there's some optimism that Georgia would get a look, but he's not in the transfer portal yet. All that's out there is speculation. And the reason we choose to report these things is because a lot of people are asking. People want to know what's going on. Well, what's going on is that radio interview you played that's up on our DawgNation website is part of the story I published last night. Speculation on other players. That's going to continue, just like it's going to continue at a lot of other places, just like we speculated all year about the Georgia quarterbacks and that one of them would leave. This is a part of college football landscape, and this is something that we're in tune to. College football doesn't have free agency yet, but what it does have is the transfer portal and rumors and speculation, and it's our job to be responsible and flush those things out when we believe that there's merit to them.
And let me add to this, Mike, that if a guy like Gilbert were to be back on the market again, what I think this provides for Georgia is a second chance that it couldn't take advantage of the first time because, Gilbert was one of those guys that did not have the most complimentary things to say about the Georgia offense at the time a year ago. And it kind of reminded some people of maybe some of the stuff that Jaden Hazelwood had said, the former wide receiver from Cedar Grove, when he chose Oklahoma initially, that Georgia was really battling an offensive reputation with some of the top offensive recruits of, is this really a place that's going to cause my skill set to flourish? Is this a place that's going to showcase me as well as it can? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you that I think that Georgia's a finished product right now offensively because I think it's far from it. But the presence of Todd Monken here getting towards the end of his first year, some of the stuff that Georgia's been able to flash with JT Daniels now at quarterback, maybe this is just wishful thinking on my part. Maybe I'm being too hopeful when I say this, but I do think it's probably a little easier to sell Georgia to an elite offensive player, now than it would have been a year ago. At the time, Gilbert says, I like what Joe Brady's doing at LSU. I'm not really quite sure what the situation is at Georgia. All of a sudden, Joe Brady's not at LSU anymore, and Georgia's not quite the same offense that it was in 2019. So if Georgia got a second chance with Gilbert, I truly believe they may be in a better position to sell themselves now than they may have been 12 months ago.
Well, think about this. Last year in April, JT Daniels was in the transfer portal, and he was interviewing with schools all over the country, making their pitches, making their sells, saying what they had to offer. He liked what Kirby Smart and Todd Monken had to say so much that he came to Georgia, even though Jamie Newman was already in that room with a 5-month head start. That's how much he thought of Todd Monken. And when we talk about Todd Monken versus James Coley or even Jim Chaney, and I'll give Jim Chaney credit, he did a nice job with Drew Brees at Purdue a long time ago, and I'm sure he was a fine NFL tight ends coach. But in Todd Monken, you've got a guy who orchestrated the NFL's #1 passing offense and set franchise records. And anybody who watched film this year knows that Georgia's had receivers running open all year. They simply didn't have a quarterback that was capable of extending the field earlier this year, or a quarterback in Dwan who was experienced enough to fly the jet and run the pro-style offense. Now you've got that guy here, and he's all in. He's all in on Todd Monken. He's all in on Kirby Smart. George Pickens, Jermaine Burton, Blaylock is coming back. And, if you're a tight end, who's going to double cover you? How are you going to – and you've got Darnell Washington on the other side. Georgia has run a pro-style offense before with success with Isaac Nauta and Charlie Warner. Now, they were primarily a run team, but running that 12 personnel, that ace formation with 2 tight ends, and again, to your point, Gilbert's not the – necessarily a prototypical tight end because he's such a gifted receiver. But when you put a personnel grouping on the field like that, the defense has to defend in a way that they show their hand. And it makes the offense that much more explosive because it puts the defense in more run-pass conflict. And that's where explosive plays come from. So once Gilbert sits down, presuming, again, he's not in the portal yet, BA. We've got to make sure we clarify that. This is all speculation at this point.
That's right.
But if he goes in the portal and he has those job interviews with coaches and he sits across from Todd Monken, just remember that of all the coaches in the country, and JT Daniels could have gone anywhere, LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, he chose Todd Monken and Kirby Smart and Georgia. So I think to your point, that does speak well. And I think we might even need to see some of that offense on Saturday because don't look now, but Missouri's in the top 25 and has won 5 out of 6 games and scored 91 points in their last 2 contests.
And I definitely want to do a lot of Georgia, Missouri with you, Mike. Let me do one more thing before we get there, though, and I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here, but, kind of an offshoot of the Gilbert topic is another thing that Kirby Smart kind of got into last night when he met with the media. And I had this audio, and you're with me now. Let me just go ahead and play it for everybody here. On the subject of those intra-conference transfers, that's what, if someone like Gilbert were to leave, that is what he would be. And we just saw a battle kind of fought over that, related to Cade Mays and Otis Reese, who ironically a couple of weeks ago finally got eligible for Ole Miss. This, even apart from just the Gilbert stuff, I think is pretty interesting. So, Mike, if you don't mind, while I got you, let me let folks hear Kirby Smart on the hesitation that he has about fully endorsing intra-conference transfers, even if his program were in a position to potentially take advantage of it. And I do want to get a thought from you on this. Here's the first one from Kirby. This is from last night. Here's Kirby.
You want an honest answer on that? I can give you the stock answer, which is I'm indifferent. But as every coach in the SEC probably wouldn't admit, it's all about who they can get based on how they want that rule. So if you got the guy sitting out there that's going to change your team, guess what you want? You want it to change, right? And if you're playing against them, you may not want it to change. So it's a selfish world out there, and every guy is trying to do what gives his team the best chance to win, and it really should be based on what's best for the players and what's best for the longevity of our conference.
So I think that's really interesting, Mike. There's another one I'm going to play for folks in a moment. But how about Kirby Smart's willingness to be candid and say, hey, you want my opinion on interconference transfers? Let's just be honest here and say that if you've got a chance to add a good player, that's what most teams are going to say they're in favor of. And if you're on the other end of that, you're going to say you're against it. That to me is a very non-political answer from Kirby Smart, refreshingly candid. And if nothing else, I just think it's interesting to hear him be so open about a subject like that.
I think he realizes how hypocritical he would look if he took a guy like Eric Gilbert, if he goes in the portal, within a year of everyone complaining and loudly about Cade Mays shouldn't be eligible right away. So, every time you point a finger, 3 points back at you. I still remember Nick Saban a few years ago standing in front of the room when Tennessee was getting Brandon Kennedy from Alabama. And Saban, was saying, well, our rules are that this guy's supposed to sit out a year, and suddenly we want to change the rules. Why am I the bad guy for wanting to enforce the rules? And then Saban said, listen, this is headed towards free agency, and right now everybody wants that. But remember, this swings both ways. So, yeah, there's going to be some guys that leave Alabama, but there's going to be some guys that come in. And, remember this. Saban said that. And I would say the same is true of a program like Georgia. So on the front end, we've seen some players who maybe couldn't get in the starting lineup or weren't happy with their playing time enter the portal. And, Georgia's second teamer is a starter somewhere else. Conversely, there's going to be some guys that are going to see Georgia as greener pastures, even though they're in perfect standing on their team. Even though they're a starter where they're at, they may say, you know what? I signed up for this program thinking that this was a championship program. And now the coordinator's gone and you're losing to teams by 38 points. And there's allegations of sexual misconduct off the field. And this just doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. And I want to go somewhere else. So the door swings both ways. And I think Kirby's just doing a good job of avoiding looking like a hypocrite.
Well, Smart went into more detail about his opinion too, hesitant to say that he thinks this is really a good thing. And he even used his own, son as a potential comparison on this. Let me let you hear one more on this topic before we change the subject. Here's Kirby again.
And I think everybody in the public would say what's best for the player to be able to go and play interconference. And some inherent part of me says, I just don't know if my son was at a place and he was not playing or he was disgruntled, and I'd want to know why it was that way. And then I'd tell him, well, you need to try harder. You need to do better. You need to continue to work. You need to continue to grow, because something about that in this world, I think, makes you a better person. Sometimes we don't demand the kids do that, and we give them the easy way out. And you know what? They can find a lot of other schools that will let them go to them. It's a really tough situation, because I don't say that from the guys who've left here. It's not about that for me. It's about what's best for our conference, what's best for our programs, and what's best for the game of football, and what's best for the kids.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know that there's an obvious right answer to this debate, and I think that Smart himself even went on and said that yesterday. But I do think it's interesting, and I do think it's at least good that Smart's willing to give voice to what is frankly kind of become an uncommon perspective around all of this. It seems like over the last year or so that, you're now not able to ask of any commitment and responsibility from players whatsoever, that whatever they want to do is now just fine no matter what it is. And, it's nice to hear Smart, who's frankly on the younger end of the coaching sphere here, kind of representing what is quickly becoming an old school perspective of, hey, I'm not quite so sure the Wild West where there are no rules at all, I'm not quite so sure that actually benefits players in the long run. I'm a little bit of an old head, so that probably, sits really well with me, but I'm kind of happy to hear somebody like Smart, who I think of as a little bit more of a new school style coach. I'm happy to hear him giving voice to that a little bit.
Well, it's a self-testimony for Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart didn't have a scholarship at Georgia until the final day when Steve Johnson flipped from Georgia to Tennessee, ironically enough. Steve would win a national championship at Tennessee in '98. But Georgia had their next head coach that Ray Goff had just signed because of that flip. So Kirby was a guy that nobody believed in, that came in and worked hard and worked his way up and became something. And in his mind, every player can do that. And so that's why he doesn't understand the people, or maybe he's not as sympathetic to some that say, I just can't do it here. I need to go somewhere else where I can get on the field quicker, because Kirby understands what it's like to work your way up through special teams. And that's a good lesson. And I think the team takes on Kirby's personality, BA, not so much with a lack of people transferring, although I would say Georgia's, pretty good in those numbers. But the fact that Georgia doesn't have anybody, or hasn't had anybody at this point, opt out, when we look around the league and we're seeing, what hasn't been spoken about, it's all been, COVID-related issues. Well, COVID-related issues after you had a certain number of players opt out and quit your team. If those players don't opt out and quit the team, those COVID issues aren't keeping you off the field. That's kind of the unspoken thing in the SEC, is that some of these other programs, Florida, Vanderbilt, they had players opt out before the year even started. So that gives them a lower base to work with, right, on their scholarship base. So they don't need as many COVIDs to be under that threshold. And I think that's part of the frustration for Georgia right now with the teams that have not shown up for games. We still don't know if Vanderbilt is going to show up on the 19th, which is just crazy to me that an SEC team might not show. But that's where we're at. And I think there's a little bit of Kirby that feels disgust that his program has been so disciplined. His kids have made those sacrifices of not going home, of not seeing family, of not extending their social circles so they can play football. And other programs don't show that same commitment. And the word that we began this conversation with, accountability. And that's really the big word right here, whether we're talking about recruiting or transfers, portals, or games canceled, is personal responsibility in our society. This has been a public service announcement.
Mike, I certainly appreciate that. In the time we have left, and I don't want to keep you all day here, but in the time we have left, I do want to talk a little bit about Georgia's game against Missouri on Saturday. I think you and I are on the same page about this. I'm impressed with what I've seen from the Tigers, especially in games they've played in Columbia this year. They haven't always been great away from home. They've been pretty tough in Como really all season long and put up a lot of points against Barry Odom's defense this past Saturday. I really feel like this is a pretty interesting measuring stick for Georgia. I know Kirby's got great respect for Missouri coach Eli Drinkwitz. In fact, we'll hear him talking about that more on our show before we're done here today. But I think this is a pretty good test for Georgia on Saturday. It's not a game in which I expect Georgia to lose, but it's a game where you can feel a little prouder about winning than maybe Mississippi State and South Carolina provided you the opportunity for.
Yeah, I've got the Bulldogs on upset alert. I think they'll win, but I think this is a very dangerous game, BA. Kirby Smart is 3-3 in noon SEC kickoffs. It's going to be cold. Georgia, not a lot of guys from the north on this team. Early kickoff, Missouri with 91 points in the last two games. A lot of confidence and a lot of momentum. You mentioned they're at home. They've won five out of their last 6 games. And the last time Georgia had a week off on account of one of these cancellations, they responded with a 7-point win over Mississippi State. Now, true, JT Daniels did throw for 401 yards, but that offense is never really did stop Mississippi State, if we're being honest. And I do think Missouri has a capable offense. Kirby's talked a lot about their quarterback. We know Connor's affinity with him because he has the same first name, and he's actually done a pretty tremendous job for a freshman. He's a guy that this league's going to have to deal with. So I agree with you. I think this is a game Georgia fans need to tune in on, and I think Georgia needs to play well to win. I mean, I absolutely think Missouri is capable pulling the upset. I'm not picking that, but I definitely think they're capable of it.
The other day, we'll finish this. Bronco Mendenhall, the Virginia coach, revealed that the ACC offered his team a chance to play December 19th. They turned down the chance to do so. Ross Dellinger from Sports Illustrated said because it's the early signing period week, he thinks there are a number of coaches and programs that just would prefer not to play the 19th unless it's a conference championship, something along those lines. And I have to admit, I haven't really considered that to be true, but I'm assuming that it probably is, that for as much as, there's thought that Vanderbilt might not show up to Georgia on December 19th, I think it's also fair to say that Georgia would actually prefer not to play December the 19th as well.
No, I wouldn't say that because of the senior day factor and the fact that the players work so hard for 10 opportunities. Hey, listen, BA, I know what it's like when you're not able to do your show. You get like a caged animal.
Sure.
When you're not, this is something that you work for and you enjoy and you appreciate every opportunity. Well, it's the same for these players, and they only have 10 guaranteed opportunities that they've made all these sacrifices and put all this work in, and they're owed that opportunity to play that game. And so I think, yes, to your point, it's a tough week with early signing day and the schedule being pushed back. But at the same time, because Kirby is a former player, he understands the opportunity, what it means. And if you're Georgia right now, you point out some potential prospects. Kirby wants every chance he can get to show some previews of what this offense can do. The Mississippi State game was a glance, but I think there's a lot more to be seen from JT Daniels and George Pickens and Jermaine Burton and Kearis Jackson and Darnell Washington before this year's finished.
Mike, I appreciate you today. Thanks for being here on our program. Look forward to catching up with you again very soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, good stuff there from Mike Griffith. Very interesting look at what's going on with Georgia. And I do think the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty interesting with the acknowledgement now that you're not going to get all of the SEC games in with Ole Miss and Texas A&M not being played. What does that mean for the rest of the games that are played? The one thing I do know for a fact is I'm pretty sure Missouri gets Georgia's best shot on Saturday. I think that Georgia's going to be locked and loaded. I do think they're going to be chomping at the bit to certainly play this game. So we'll see. But I'm expecting a pretty good showing from the Dogs on Saturday. And I agree with Mike that Georgia may need it overall because Missouri's done a pushover, especially there at Faurot Field, where they have found a way to win some games thus far this season. Let me transition here to our SEC through just for a moment. As we do, for those of you watching the video, you may notice that I'm wearing a really cool shirt here from On Reserve. Now, I don't have the magic of the studio to kind of zoom in on this really close, but one thing you notice is the print on this are the tiny Bulldog logos kind of all over the shirt here. If you want a better look at this, let me give you the best way to do that. Just go to DawgNation.com. There's a link for On Reserve right up there at the top of the page here today. And this is an example of some of the great holiday gift ideas that our friends at On Reserve have. And the great thing is, and this is all a very true story, is I've got a number of things from On Reserve lately, and it just shows up right there on my front porch. This shirt the other day came in the mail, the delivery. You open it up, healthy, safe, wonderful personal gift just for me. I love the idea of giving a gift for myself, to be honest with you. And that's exactly what this was. And listen, for those hard to buy for folks in your holiday gift list, really good looking UGA apparel, I'm pretty sure is a big hit. And On Reserve is as good about providing that as anyone is. So go to the top of the page, DawgNation.com. And then you can find the link there for On Reserve. And when you use the promo code DawgNation, you can get 10% off your entire purchase today, including off the shirt that I'm wearing there right now. I love On Reserve. It's kind of an Athens original. TJ, the founder, is UGA grad. There's just a real Georgia vibe, not just UGA, but the entire state when you go in there. The stores, whether it be the Athens location, location in Atlanta, it's just a really cool place. I'm a huge fan of the On Reserve apparel, the brand itself. So find out more about this. Either go to DawgNation, top of the page, find the link to On Reserve, go to OnReserve.com, and you can just experience all of this. And make sure you use the promo code DawgNation for 10% savings on your order here today. Just an incredible opportunity to take advantage of that. Promo code DawgNation, 10% off your order, including the shirt that I'm wearing from our friends there at On Reserve. Let me just say this real quick before I kind of go fully into our SEC through. On one of the subjects that Mike and I were kind of addressing before with the intra-conference transfers, whether it be guys that have left Georgia, such as Cade Mays, or guys that could be leaving LSU looking for another place like a Rick Gilbert, anybody that you want to mention here. The one thing that I think is undeniably true is that, and Mike alluded to this, and I've said this before on my shows in the past, that a lot of the lesser programs in the SEC celebrate stuff like this because they think it's for a chance for them to go poaching off a Georgia roster. They look at Georgia's kind of this bloated roster where you've got all these 4 and 5 star guys and not enough playing time for them to all go around. And so therefore it'll be easy for the Ole Misses and the Tennessees and the programs like that to come take players from Georgia if the intra-conference transfer stuff is kind of more than just the one-time thing that was said to be this year. But if it becomes the true hard and fast rule for the league, that I think there's this misconception that it's the lesser programs will benefit from that, when the actual truth is the opposite. And look, in college football, like a lot of things in life, it's the rich who find a way to get richer. And it is programs like Georgia and Alabama who've recruited the best out of high school. They'll also recruit this portion of roster management the best as well. So if it becomes open season on other rosters in the SEC, don't be surprised when it's a school like Georgia that ends up taking the most advantage of that. That's at least my perspective on that, and kind of interesting to think about that on a day in which Kirby Smart has talked some about it. All right, for the rest of our SEC through here, let me kind of run through some of the college football playoff top 25 that was released last night. Obviously, no surprise with Alabama at number 1 there. I think they've really distanced themselves from the rest of college football right now. I think they've distanced themselves from Florida in the SEC ahead of that SEC championship showdown, and just kind of distanced themselves all the way around here. It is Notre Dame at 2, Clemson at 3, Ohio State at 4, then Texas A&M at 5, and Florida at 6. And I would say for the most part, the powers that be in college football can really celebrate the work that's been done this year to have this season take place. And I would say that for the most part, it's been a smashing success. I think the only place where we're really seeing the frustration of not being able to get all the games in impacting the competitive balance as it relates to Ohio State and as it relates to Texas A&M. There's been a lot of frustrating cancellations, and there's been a lot of kind of hand-wringing from week to week about who's going to be playing whom, and obviously the coaches and players have kind of face the brunt of that. But for the most part, I don't know that this has impacted our competitive balance and our understanding of who the best teams in the country truly are. But when it relates to Ohio State, who is likely one of the 4 best teams, certainly at the beginning of the season, I would have given you very little argument that they weren't among the 4 best teams, but they're just not playing enough football. They did blow up Michigan State, but looks like they're actually not playing Michigan on Saturday. At a certain point in time, you have to wonder, is it enough just to be the best team on paper? Don't you also have to prove some of this on the field a little bit? So Ohio State at 4 right now, having played very little football, is frustrating. I'm not going to lie about that. And then one spot below that, Texas A&M. I think A&M is a good team. And A&M is not going to get the kind of argument in their favor the way that some teams might, because A&M is not necessarily quite as spectacular. I said this the other day in reference to Texas A&M. There's this dominant narrative in the SEC that the league is filled with teams that have fully evolved offensively and teams that haven't quite gotten there yet. You think about Florida and Alabama as this full evolution of offense, what LSU also became last year, this full offensive evolution. And a school like Georgia is viewed as having not quite gotten to that point yet. But A&M, I think, is this whole one-off category unto itself where they're not trying to fully evolve into the kind of offense that Alabama and Florida are playing. And they're also not content to be what Georgia has been, as kind of the diametric opposite of that, very run-heavy, much more conservative. Texas A&M is content to run the ball at a lot of 2-back sets, good offensive line. Jimbo Fisher likes quarterback play, though. I would say that Kellen Mond is a good quarterback, not a great quarterback, but they're not scoring 50 points a game. They are controlling most of the games they're playing, but they're not scoring 50 a game. And so therefore, to the eye, maybe they don't quite pass the so-called eye test the way the other programs do, but they just, when they get a chance to play, they keep right on coasting, right on winning for the most part, including fairly comfortably at Auburn a week ago. And so this is the other kind of level of frustration we're dealing with because of how the season's playing out, that we're still kind of left to wonder just how good Texas A&M really is. Do they deserve that at-large consideration as a team that's going to have a chance to put a one-loss campaign together playing an SEC schedule? And even if they don't end up playing all 10 of their games, they're going to play 8, 9 games, whatever it is. That's not an easy thing to do, to go 8-1 in the SEC or whatever the schedule allows for Texas A&M. And yet we can't quite figure out how good they are either, because they're going to miss another game on Saturday, this time against Ole Miss. Just a little bit of a frustrating situation there at 4 and 5. But other than that, I think you've got to, for the most part, celebrate what college football has been able to do this year. It's made the playoff conversation a little more maddening. For the most part, we predicted that, and now that's kind of playing itself out. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, I want to turn our attention back fully here to the Dogs just for a moment. And piggybacking off what Mike and I were talking about a moment ago, the challenge for Georgia against Missouri on Saturday. If you were unsure what the Tigers bring to the table, the fact they put 50 points on the board against Arkansas this past week, and the great work that Barry Odom has done as defensive coordinator, really put to the test by Eli Drinkwitz's offense this past Saturday. Kirby Smart, very complimentary of what Missouri's doing offensively when he spoke to reporters last night. Let me let you hear a little bit of that.
The quarterback's very accurate. He throws a really catchable ball. I've been extremely impressed with this guy's composure, poise, and he's going to be there for a while. He's young, and he knows coverages. As soon as he sees a coverage, he knows where to go with the ball. He throws a really good deep ball. So when you play contested press man all over the field, he makes throws and they make 50-50 catches. When you play a zone and you spot drop all over, he knows where to go with the ball and he completes it. And he's got a really good balanced run game to go with it. And part of being a quarterback is being a good decision makers. Eli and them do a great job of run pass conflicts where there's a rocket guy that he can hand it to or he can throw it to, and then he can hand it off. Well, if you're not in the perfect call, then they can get you here, they can get you there. They're tough to defend, and he's going to be great for our league because when you look at what he does, there'll be people copycatting what he does to add that to their offense.
Yeah, so listen, I think it's really interesting stuff from Kirby Smart. Of course, the selection committee for the college football playoff noticed this last night. Missouri slides up into that number 25 ranking. And I think I've said this a couple times already this week. I'm actually somewhat glad of all of this. I like the idea of Georgia being tested one more time. Let's find out, has Georgia really improved? Or was Georgia just playing an overmatched opponent in South Carolina the last time it went out there, and an opponent in Mississippi State that didn't have quite enough players to even make a real game effort of it? Was that just all opponent driven, or is there something to point to for Todd Monken near the end of his first year to suggest that Georgia is offensively getting better at the right time? And can the Georgia defense, who's given up some big point totals in its biggest games this season, against a Missouri offense that's shown you it can score too, can they go out and have a shutdown performance on Saturday as a way of kind of putting a punctuation mark on at least near the end of the season? I think all that's pretty fascinating for a Saturday. I'm actually glad to see Missouri playing as well as it is ahead of this game against the Dogs. As we wrap up here, let me also say this on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. You may have seen that Georgia slipped down to number 9 in the playoff rankings last night, spot below Cincinnati. Iowa State also jumps way up. I'm not quite so sure a team that loses to Louisiana Lafayette ought to be ranked ahead of Georgia, but I guess when you lose twice, you don't have a whole lot of room for complaining about that. But another reason for Georgia to go out this Saturday against Missouri and prove what the Dogs are all about. So we'll look forward to hopefully being able to see them get that done. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort today. I'll look forward to seeing all of you back here again tomorrow. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Appreciate all of you being here as we kind of handle our business at home here for right now. But we certainly appreciate your patience with that and appreciate you being a part of the program here today. And we will look forward to taking some of your comments and kind of rolling through that as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down right now. Edwin Atwood asking about Jordan Davis. I know they're working trying to get Davis back. Smart has said that he's close. So maybe we'll get a chance to see Jordan Davis on Saturday for the Dogs. By the way, check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. You want to stay toasty and warm this winter, R.S. Andrews will give you a chance to do that. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Steve Schifini says he thinks that 13.5 is kind of a lot of points for Georgia in a noon kickoff. Could very well be. I know Georgia didn't fare particularly well in its last noon kickoff, did not cover a 17-point spread against Kentucky a few weeks ago. I would say that there's a pretty big difference between 13 and 13.5. Apparently Steve's seen that at 13.5 at the moment. I know the number we're going to operate off of for our Go With The Flow this week is going to be more along the lines of 13, which is a pretty key number for those of you that care about gambling. Seeing Georgia match a 13, a little bit little bit easier than maybe exceeding the 13.5, which requires you to go ahead and get the full 2-touchdown lead there. So we'll follow that. Let's see what else is going on. Joel Moody hoping the Georgia defense can really respond to some of the disappointing performances had so far this year. By the way, it is now official that Rick Gilbert has opted out at LSU. This is coming down just a moment ago. No word on transferring necessarily, but the opt out, which is something that Ed Orgeron said that he would do, that has apparently taken place. Sheldon Tucker says, who has Missouri beat? They did beat Vanderbilt, beat them 41-0. Not everybody's blown out Vanderbilt this year. They beat Kentucky, handled Kentucky pretty well, beat LSU, beat Arkansas, scored 50 against Arkansas. Who was their fifth win? Who was the fifth? Why am I blanking on their fifth win? Somebody will tell us here in a minute who their fifth win was. Joel Ortega says, BA, do you think if we can get the recruits that we want in this class that can be our best defense and a more complete team on both sides of the ball, we can see a multi-year national championship winner? Boy, I like the idea of that. I mean, I do think that that Georgia obviously had some huge defensive needs for its class of 2021. And I know people are a little down on the defense right now because they haven't played well in big games. But listen, you still want that elite talent. So, Jarrell, I think that your mind's in the right place, that Georgia right now would appear to be doing a very good job of restocking itself where it really needs that talent. I think that Georgia's seemingly doing a very good job of that. And certainly, you talk about the notion of being a multiple-time national championship winner. I'm at least comfortable saying that the way in which they're recruiting allows them to maintain status as a certainly viable contender each and every year, which I think is about all you can really ask for. Nick Sheeman, I hope I pronounced that name correctly, Nick. If I didn't, I apologize. Says, is there any reason to be concerned about JT Daniels? Nick, I guess I'm of the belief that Daniels is returning next year to Georgia, and I think most people kind of took the tweet from the other day as where he said, hey, I forget what he said. If it was unfinished business or more to come, one of those kind of cryptic style tweets. I kind of joined the throngs of people who kind of took that as kind of a cryptic nod that he was planning on returning. I think the biggest issue related to Daniels is probably health related. Remember, when he goes on the Marty McGee show a couple of weeks ago, he's asked about his health. He says that he's almost 100%, but he described some ways related to knee mobility, things like that, where he's not quite 100%. And I think the one thing that can get you dinged in NFL circles more than anything else is something related to your health. We see guys get drafted in the first round that don't play well all the time. Allen from Buffalo, when he was at Wyoming, he wasn't even good. He had awful stats, never won. But the NFL teams overlooked that quickly, and they just scarfed him up. Daniel Jones wasn't really very good at Duke. And he just got scarfed up quickly by NFL scouts. NFL teams don't really care all that much, it would seem, about how well you play in college. But the one thing that they do seem to have a lot of trepidation about is someone who might be injured. So I would imagine that might be, and this is all speculation on my part, but I would imagine that might be one of the things that's on Daniel's mind is his desire to make sure that to make sure that he's healthy before he lets those NFL physicians start poking and prodding around that knee. And he wants to really make sure that he's had that full recovery time necessary. I'm sure he wants to play better on the field. I'm sure he'd love to help, contribute to a championship for Georgia. I'm sure all of that's on his mind, but more time to rest and recover might be at the heart of why it's fairly certain that Daniels is coming back next year as opposed to giving the NFL a try. Let's see what else. Heather Bain asking about LeCount being in this game. I know Kirby has said that LeCount's practicing some, but still a ways away from playing, I believe is what Kirby said there. So, this kind of is in line with what we said about, him after his accident occurred. This is a pretty serious accident that he had, broken ribs, things like that. Some fairly, fairly labored recovery associated with that. I think it's great that he wants to, and I think that he certainly enjoyed being back at practice, but he's been limited in practice still. So LeCount playing, I would say, is a pretty significant long shot, if not an impossibility. Randy Hall says, how would Gilbert work himself with Pickens, Burton, Blaylock, Jackson, Washington, Bowers? If Gilbert comes, will that affect Bowers coming? Well, at this point in time, it would be all speculation anyway, but I'm assuming that it would not. Typically speaking, tight end is not a big freshman position anyway. So for Brock Bowers, who I do think is a pretty dynamic pass catching weapon, but my expectation for Brock would not be to be doing that in 2021 anyway, that he's probably going to have to wait his turn as it is. And so if you're Bowers, what's the difference between waiting in line behind, Darnell Washington or Darnell Washington and a Rick Gilbert, right? I mean, it's really not that different necessarily. And, let's face it, one of the reasons why someone like me would want to talk about a Rick Gilbert is, with all due respect to anybody else that Georgia has, if a Rick Gilbert wants to come to Georgia, he's going to come, and he very easily could take someone's spot. He could also very easily take away someone's touches. And that's just Rick Gilbert is a very good player. So now that doesn't mean there's not room for others as well. I mean, Georgia plays a lot of tight ends. There are a lot of teams that play a good number of tight ends. I mean, there's still guys on the Georgia roster we haven't even seen a lot yet. I mean, I still have pretty high expectations for a guy like Rylan Godius, for instance, who I think can be a pass catching weapon too. So there's a lot to figure out about that. But if you have a chance to get Gilbert, you go do that, and you kind of see what happens after that. So, and in terms of more established receivers like Burton and Pickens, people like that, even though someone like Gilbert could potentially take away from their touches if he comes here, Pickens is going to thrive the more viable weapons there are that defenses can't really focus in on him too much. And Burton may be the same way a little bit. So I think the presence of Gilbert, while taking away touches from other playmakers, could have the potential of benefiting all of them because it raises the overall level of the Georgia offense. Jermaine King says, stop apologizing for working from home. We've spent most of the year watching you from your home. Well, I appreciate that, Jermaine. I guess I'm always just a little bit self-conscious with the fact that the show is just a little bit different when I'm here. Michael Webb says, since they've distanced themselves, is it safe to say that Bama is at least 6 feet away from Notre Dame? Yeah, I would say that's probably about right, Michael. Pretty good stuff there. Joel Moody says LeCount's 25%. They said what I think they actually said is LeCount's going through 25% of the practice reps, if I heard it correctly. Maybe Joel, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I believe they said he's going through about 25% of the practice reps. Jackie Daytona curious about what Georgia's run-pass ratio is going to be on Saturday. I think some of this, Jackie, also is related to the weather. It's going to be cold, and I guess we're trying to find out how much precipitation there's going to be on Saturday. So you got some of that to think about in relation to all this kind of stuff too. Yeah, Ken Feinberg says low 40s and rain in terms of the forecast. Shyman. Okay. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. Thanks for helping me with the pronunciation on that. I appreciate your comments in our comments section today. Let's see what else. Steve Shuny says Josh Allen's pretty good. Daniel Jones. Yeah. Daniel Jones maybe not working out for the Giants, and Josh Allen's turned out to be a good quarterback for the Bills, but I would say that he was not good in college, but he's definitely turned out to be pretty good in the NFL, it would appear. John Paul Harris referencing the outlaw Josie Wales. I'm always up for a good classic movie reference. All right, let me go over to YouTube here for a moment, then we got to get off the air after that. All right. Frank Patterson. Funny line from him on YouTube. Thomas Van Sant already looking forward to stomping Florida next year. Yeah, I'm excited about that too. Glenn Hartley said, did Centel give me that shirt? Man, Jeff Centel don't give me any gifts. You must be crazy. Jeff's not going to give me a gift. Jarrell Ortega hoping wait, is Jarrell on both comment sections? That's a pretty impressive performance by Jarrell. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we're all hopeful kind of see some good offense from Georgia in the Missouri game as a precursor to what more of 2021 could provide. And maybe Kirby could talk himself into a little bit more of that based on what he sees. You never know. CB, it's I didn't really think about this. The clock is set to 12:25, an homage to Christmas. No, but I'm going to say that it is. From now on, that's what I'm going to tell folks. Tell folks it is. So the clock used to work, and it also you can't quite tell this, but it's like sitting down on the mantle right now. It used to be hung up. Couldn't get that thing to stay hung for anything. But I'm going to tell folks it's 12:25 in honor of Christmas. I like the idea of that. Joey says J.J. Holloman just entered the transfer portal again. That's kind of interesting. Holloman's a good player. Holloman's a good player. Stephen Venanzi asked about Missouri. No, I guess I'm going to be here for the Missouri game on Saturday. So we're going to do that instead. Me here covering from home on Saturday. Hunter Davis on Darnell Washington. You got to see. This is one of the things that we kind of do sometimes is we kind of rush to get Darnell on the field, and we make a quick evaluation of him, kind of where he is, based on this right now. Rick Gilbert's not necessarily a blazing speedster himself necessarily. I mean, Gilbert's more about the athleticism and things like that. But I mean, I think that he and Darnell both are plenty athletic enough. I would say the difference between Washington and Gilbert is that Gilbert, had an SEC quarterback throwing him balls at Marietta. He became a real polished receiving, threat because of that. In the realm of like 5 stars, there's comparisons that can be made between those guys. And I would say that Rick was probably a little bit more polished as a high school recruit than Darnell was. Doesn't mean they finished that way. Darnell Washington go to the NFL and become Ozzie Newsome. But for now, I would say that there has been a little bit of a different level of polish for Gilbert there, growing up at Marietta High School as opposed to Darnell Washington, who was at Las Vegas. So you got to give Darnell a little bit of time to show what he's going to be as an offensive weapon. I agree with Thomas Tyson that the loss of Holloman hurt Georgia. I thought that JJ was a good player. And I thought that loss hurt Georgia. And, listen, sometimes that stuff, a little bit of a shame. I mean, that can be tough from time to time. All right, let's get one more. We're going to get off. Lucy Bowers-Boykin, also the subject of J.J. Holloman. Matt Talley on kind of, going back what happened in Holloman's past. Yeah, you can't. I mean, he did admit. I can't, I don't want to relitigate all this, but it was a tough situation. I don't think Georgia had any choice in the matter at the time. I am also the kind of person that wants to, if Holloman couldn't play at Georgia, I'm glad he got a chance to play somewhere. I do think, guys are better with football in their life. It gives them a chance to rehabilitate themselves to where they need to go mentally, physically, spiritually, everything else. So it's a shame the way that worked out. I don't think Georgia had a choice. I'm glad Holloman's getting a chance to play somewhere else. On the field, his loss was certainly felt by UGA. Let's see what else. Tennille, thanks for being here. Appreciate you as always. Shelton Tucker, thanks for checking out. Kyle Folds giving his favorite Westerns. Yeah, my grandfather loved Westerns, man. He loved like those old matinee style Westerns, not like the stuff that you really saw, like, not like the True Grit stuff, things like that. He liked the old school, like, 10-cent Saturday afternoon matinee type Westerns. He loved those things. All right, we're going to get ready to go here today. I appreciate all of you being with us. For our RS Andrews cool down, obviously make sure you check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Also later on this week, check out Go With The Flow presented by RS Andrews as we look at the top games of the weekend, assuming there'll still be any left by the time we get a chance to pick them. But going to be a lot of fun. We'll see that then. Obviously, AJC, Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Make sure you stay up to date on everything happening around the world there. Of course, political stuff ongoing. You want to follow all of that. A lot of sports news going on there as well. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com, a great way to stay up to date on everything happening there. Interesting news on FDA approval for the Pfizer vaccine that could be coming out here really soon. So you can follow that up there on AJC.com too. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Thanks to all of you for being here. Appreciate you being here for RS Andrews Cool Down and DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. Thanks so much.